Is your Miata so slow, you lost a race to drying paint? Do you often walk places instead of driving because you know it'll be faster? Well, then this video is for you, friend. Because if you follow these simple steps to turbocharge your Miata, you'll have every Mustang driver on the block questioning every decision he's ever made. In this video, I'm going to cover the steps that I went through to turbocharge my Miata. Now, when you're building a car, you have three things to think about: power, reliability, and cost. You have to find your own balance. Do you want to buy the Garrett turbocharger, or do you want to risk it with an eBay unit? I also tried to include a lot of small details that I wish I knew about when I was building my car. So let's get started. The first thing you need is a healthy car. You can determine this with a compression test or a dyno pull. I dynoed my car and it made 102 horsepower with just an intake, so I knew it was pretty healthy. Your next step is to do a lot of homework, and I mean a lot. I spent hours on MiataTurbo.net just reading through threads. I did over a year of research before I bought a single turbo part. The first thing I did was buy one of the most important tools you can buy for tuning: an AFR gauge. Many aftermarket AFR gauges can communicate with the stock ECU. Next up, while the engine is still completely stock, buy yourself a Squared ECU. Get the car running smoothly while it's still stock. When your engine is at a lower power level, it'll give you a much larger margin of error when you're learning how to use the Squared. The base map that Squared comes with is actually really good. You'll be able to get the car started and drive it around virtually without touching a thing. After you get the car running smoothly on Squared, it's going to be time to upgrade your injectors. A really easy way to do it is to pick up some refurbished RX-8 injectors. I got mine from eBay. They drop directly into the stock rail with no modification, and even the stock harness connectors just plug right in. The only thing you have to do is change a couple settings in Squared and you're ready to go. This is also a good time to change your fuel pump, especially if you have a really old unit. The stock fuel pump can handle around 300 wheel horsepower, but the flow will start falling off in the top end, so it's a good idea to install a bigger unit. It's pretty easy. One thing you want to consider when you're making upgrades and going step by step, you only want to do one thing at a time. Because if you make multiple changes and then you have a problem, you're not going to know which change caused that problem. So install the injectors, get it running smoothly, and then go back in and do the pump. Next up, you're going to need to be a riser. That's right, you got to install an intercooler. Did I stutter? That's right, I said an intercooler. Now, my dilemma while I was turbocharging this car is it was my daily driver. I couldn't have it down for more than about 8 hours at a time. So I tried to knock out each project individually every time I had some spare time to work on the car. So I bought this intercooler and I did some custom brackets to mount it up, and you can really figure out 90% of your intercooler piping without even having the turbocharger installed in the car. I got all of my 2.5-inch intercooler piping from siliconeintakes.com. I'll go ahead and post a link in the description. It's really high quality stuff, much better than the stuff you find in those eBay kits. This is what my car looked like when it was intercooled. Another thing that you have to be sure is mechanically sound, especially if you have a 1.6 liter, is your ignition system. The 1.6 liter ignition is weak, so you need to do everything you can to make sure it's strong for turbo. I went with NGK blue wires and a basic NGK plug. And one thing that you're going to need to do is go to a colder spark plug. The factory 1.6 uses a 5 heat range, and I've changed mine out to a 7, which seemed to work best. You may also eventually need to gap down your spark plugs depending on how much boost you're going to be running. Now, as you've seen, this car has taken some serious abuse, but everything's got its limits. Some things that you need to think about when you're upgrading your car are, when are things going to start to break? Now, the stock 1.6 liter differential, most people say is only good for around 200 wheel horsepower, and they can just explode at random above that. The stock 5-speed transmission, most people say 250 to 275 wheel horsepower. The stock clutch, probably 140, 150 wheel horsepower. You're gonna start thinking about upgrading that clutch, and that may be something that you wanna do before you even start your build. Now, clutches are funny. Sometimes they won't slip in the beginning, but the first time you line up with a Mustang and you lose because your clutch starts slipping, you're gonna be kicking yourself. One more thing you wanna think about before going turbo is to upgrade your cooling system. I have a big Mishimoto radiator in mind, along with the coolant reroute that's sold by 949 Racing. The coolant reroute is imperative for keeping the rear cylinders cool. Alright, so your cooling system's in order, your drivetrain's in order, you got your turbocharger, and you're ready to slap it on. But wait, it's not just a bolt-on affair. Remember, this engine is naturally aspirated. It was never designed to have a turbo, so you've got to make a few modifications. Up next is probably the scariest part of the entire build, drilling a gigantic hole in your oil pan. There are some precautions you can take to make this a little bit safer. See here? The flutes of the bit are filled with grease. What that's gonna do is, as you're drilling a hole in your pan, it's gonna help catch some of those shavings. Now, make sure your pan is still full of oil at this point. Another thing you can do, see how I wrap this with electrical tape? When I actually drilled my pan, I used even more than that. This is for demonstration purposes. But what it's gonna do is, when you punch through your pan, it's gonna stop the drill bit from going in too far. Let me tell you why that's important. Right on the other side of the pan, where you're drilling, is your oil pickup. If your drill bit hits your oil pickup and breaks it, you're pulling your engine to replace it. You don't want to do that, so use a whole freaking roll of electrical tape on your drill bit so it doesn't go through too far. Next up, you have to thread the hole that you just drilled with the tap. You want to use the same strategy with the tap. Grease those flutes. It's going to help trap any shavings of aluminum in this tap. Go slow so you cut nice clean threads, and pull it out often to make sure you clean the shavings off. You want to get as few shavings as possible inside the oil pan. After you're done drilling and tapping, you want to drain the oil out, which will probably have some shavings in it, and then spray some mineral spirits in that hole to try to clean everything out of there. Don't forget to put oil back in your car before you start it later. 1.6 liter guys are also really lucky because we have a high pressure oil feed port right in the side of the block. Most turbos require a restrictor, so the CHRA does not see too much oil pressure. Now you can bolt up your manifold, turbo, and downpipe and figure out the rest of your intake piping. Don't forget the blow-off valve. If your turbo is water cooled, you're gonna have to hook up your water lines as well. From the factory, there's a water line running from here to your thermostat housing. Basically, you're gonna run one of your turbo lines from the top, the other one from the bottom. It doesn't matter, they can go either way. I have these sleeves on mine to protect them from the heat. You wanna use that stuff anywhere you can. You don't want any of these lines melting or breaking. Depending on what downpipe you have, it may interfere with the stock heater core lines. I know it's tough to see, but that heater core hard line down there may have to be bent, and you can just run a straight hose right into your heater core. Again, I have those all wrapped up to shield them from the heat of the downpipe. Your boost gauge and your blow-off valve can be hooked up to these two free vacuum ports, or anywhere after the throttle body. It has to be post-throttle body for those two things. The wastegate signal has to be before the throttle body, so it does not see any vacuum. Now that you have everything installed and connected, I would go through and check every bolt on everything you've touched. And after that, it's time to start it up. When you first start it up, you want to make sure you have oil pressure. Now that it's running, you just want to survey the engine bay and check for any leaks. You mess with a lot of oil and water connections, so you want to make sure they're all solidified before you drive the car. As far as startup, it should start exactly like it did and idle normally. The exhaust is probably going to sound a little bit different. After you check it out, you're ready for your first test drive. I know it's tempting, but this is how you don't leave for your first test drive. The first time you take it out, you want to drive it real easy. Let it warm up slow, smell for weird smells, listen for weird noises. You want to make sure everything's kosher and nothing's melting. Your goal should be to have the car completely ready for the tuner when you bring it to the dyno. You shouldn't expect him to fix things for free, aside from doing the actual tune. So after you've driven the car around for a while and it's driving pretty good, it's time to get into some boost. What you want to do is ease the car into a little bit of boost, just to make sure the air-fuel ratios are good. Even the base map is scaled for boost, which means that when the base map was designed, they estimated how much fuel the car would need when it's in boost. After progressing to slightly higher and higher boost levels and seeing that your AFRs are good, you want to test out your wastegate to make sure you're hitting your boost target. Now, Mega Squirt has an awesome feature called overboost protection. You can set it to a certain boost level, and if you go over that level, it will cut the spark, so it won't let the boost go even higher. If somehow your wastegate signal line melts and you don't have overboost protection, you could be hitting 30 PSI like that, and it'll just take once to destroy your engine. So if you have Mega Squirt, set up that overboost protection and go out and do a couple pulls to make sure you're hitting your target. My target boost is 14.5, so let's see how my car does. Once you do that and you sort out any issues, you're ready to bring it to your tuner. Most tuners will be able to give you a decent tune, but it's best to find someone that knows Miatas and knows Mega Squirt. Let me know in the comments section if you want me to do a video on installing and setting up your Mega Squirt. Alright, that's all I got for you. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I have my links to social media in the description. See you next week.